you did a brilliant documentary for the BBC on Hillsborough, where I think you spoke a little bit about your own experience, but mostly with the families and with your dad. And for anyone who hasn't heard it, I think you can get it on the BBC app. But, it finishes, I think you say, "Thanks, Dad." And it's in that manner of, he's opened up maybe in a way he hadn't previously. That, because you were at Hillsborough with your brother as well. Like, that day, is that the day in your life that stands out above all others, that changed everything for your family?
I mean, yeah, you could definitely say that. I'm not sure if it stands out or if it stands. It sort of stands alone. I think it's kind of. I think it changed everything for a lot of people, I think. And, I always worry talking about it that, because my experience of it was nothing compared to the experience of people who lost family members, of people who were there, of people who still live with the effects of it, and people who've died as a result of Hillsborough later in their lives. And it turned people's lives completely upside down, and people are still fighting for that now. Still now. It was 1989, and they're still fighting, and I find that extraordinary. And it still makes me really, really angry that nobody properly has been held to account for it. It just, I think there is the issue of somebody being made to take responsibility for Hillsborough itself, but I think it also has huge repercussions for crowd safety in any situation. If there are no repercussions, if nobody is held accountable for this, then it feels more likely that it will happen again, even though there have been safety improvements in the grounds as a result of Hillsborough.
It does feel as though over the last few years that every time there's been a step forward, and there've been some big steps forward towards justice, it's just taken away again. And for the families, every time I'd imagine it's brought up, they're reminded, and the stress and the strain of that. Like, it is just this huge burden on the city that anytime you go to Liverpool, you go around Anfield, you can almost still feel it. Your dad was on the show with us last year, and he gave a similar answer, and I think it's always been his way of, yes, I suffered, but again, compared to the families of the 97 victims, we haven't really. But even still, for you, if you're teenage years, these are pretty formative years. There's firstly the impact of you're at the ground, but also you're having to watch as your dad, and I guess your mom as well, are going through this just most terrible of experience that nothing can prepare you for it, that nobody can take you aside and say, here's how you deal with something like this. That's a lot to go through as a teenager.
Yeah, and it was everywhere. It wasn't. It's. I know you're saying that if you go to Liverpool now, or you're around Anfield now, there is always a presence. And at the time, it was assemblies in school about it. Then it was in the papers. It was on the news. Mum and Dad were at funerals pretty much every day. I think they went to over half of the funerals, which would have been 95 at the time, I think. So that was them for a couple of weeks. If they weren't at the funerals, then they were in at Anfield and talking to families, talking to people who just wanted to come to the ground. So it was all consuming, not just that day, but all around that time. But that's not to say that was a bad thing. I think sometimes when you're part of something, even if it's at a slight distance, if you're part of something that feels that huge, there's something quite comforting in being around other people to whom it is maybe even more important. And that was helpful, I think, for Mum and Dad, I think, to be in and around the ground like that. Paul and I went in one day. We weren't there. We were 12 and 13, and we went in, and Paul tied a teddy bear on the goal at the Cop end, and we walked along the Cop and we saw all the tributes. So, but the atmosphere, it was incredibly moving, and also it felt right. I think it felt like the right thing to do.
Your dad is a reluctant hero at the best of times, I think, but when he talks about Hillsborough, say, he sort of moves it to one side. But like, of all the things he has achieved, I'd imagine as a family, the pride with how he handled that, and how you as a family handled that, because I'm sure your mum was a huge part of that as well, in supporting you as kids and supporting him as a husband, that you got through that as a family, and also the leadership that the entire family showed throughout the years.
Yeah, I think my mum's role in all of it was, as you say, was huge as well, because like you said, she's kind of managing her family, two of whom were there on the day, and then two little ones as well. My sister would have been a baby at the time, my younger sister, and at the same time sort of supporting my dad. And, you know, as most men of that generation and upbringing are, not a talker about his feelings, or, you know, not somebody who's gonna give very much away about it. So yeah, I think what she did was incredible. And I think there was I think that, you know, we didn't talk about it a lot at the time, but I think from what we've talked about since, and from what Dad has said since, I think there was, I think that because he understood it, because he understood the club, because he understood the fans, because he understood the families, that I think he was able to say and do the right things that were what people needed at the time, because he knew them. They were, you know, there was a connection there, and that's why they knew what to do, I think.